Sarah Martinez wiped the grease from her hands with a worn cloth, the familiar smell of motor oil and metal filling her nostrils as she worked beneath the hood of a 2018 Honda Civic. The afternoon sun streamed through the garage windows of Tony's auto repair, casting long shadows across the concrete floor littered with tools and car parts. She had been working at this small neighborhood garage for 3 years now, and most customers barely noticed her beyond her ability to diagnose engine problems with an almost supernatural accuracy. The sleeve of her blue coveralls had ridden up slightly as she reached for a wrench, revealing just a glimpse of black ink on her forearm. Sarah quickly tugged the fabric down, a habit she had developed long ago. The tattoo hidden beneath told a story she wasn't ready to share with anyone, especially not in this quiet suburb of Denver, where her biggest worry was supposed to be whether Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick would pass its next inspection. "Sarah, you got another customer pulling up," called Tony from the office, his gravelly voice carrying across the garage. Tony Castellano was a good man in his 60s who had given her a chance when nobody else would. He never asked too many questions about her past, and she never volunteered information. It was an arrangement that worked for both of them. She looked up to see a sleek black Mercedes sedan rolling into the parking lot. The car looked out of place among the usual lineup of older vehicles and family cars that made up their typical clientele. Through the windshield, she could make out a woman in an expensive-looking blazer talking animatedly on her phone. The woman stepped out of the Mercedes, her heels clicking against the asphalt. She was tall, blonde, and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. Her designer purse probably cost more than Sarah made in 2 months. But it was the way the woman's eyes swept the garage, taking in every detail, every face, that made Sarah's stomach tighten with recognition. "Excuse me?" the woman said, approaching Sarah with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm looking for someone who might be able to help me with my car. It's been making some unusual noises." Sarah nodded, wiping her hands again. "What kind of noises? Engine knock, squealing brakes?" The woman tilted her head slightly, studying Sarah's face. "Actually, I think I might know you from somewhere. Have we met before?" The question hung in the air like smoke from burning oil. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, but her expression remained neutral. She had learned long ago to control her reactions, to keep her face blank when danger approached. "I don't think so. I've got one of those faces, I guess. People say that a lot." The woman's smile remained fixed, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. "Well, maybe you're right. Could you take a look under the hood? I'm hearing this grinding sound when I accelerate." Sarah nodded and gestured toward the Mercedes. As she walked around to pop the hood, she caught sight of another black vehicle parked across the street, a Suburban with tinted windows. Her trained eye noticed immediately that the engine was running, despite the fact that no one appeared to be getting in or out. Every instinct she had developed over years of staying hidden suddenly screamed danger. Under the hood of the Mercedes, everything looked pristine, too pristine. The engine was spotless, the belts were new, and there wasn't a speck of dust or wear on any component. This car had barely been driven, let alone developed mechanical problems. Sarah's hands moved over the engine parts anyway, going through the motions while her mind raced. "Everything looks good under here," she said finally, closing the hood. "I'm not seeing any obvious problems. When do you usually hear this grinding sound?" The blonde woman had moved closer, close enough that Sarah could smell her expensive perfume. "Oh, it's very intermittent. Sometimes it only happens when I'm in certain neighborhoods. This neighborhood, for instance." The words were casual, conversational, but they carried a weight that made Sarah's blood run cold. She glanced again at the black Suburban across the street, and this time she noticed a second one parked further down the block. Both vehicles had their engines running, and both had the characteristic appearance of government vehicles. "Maybe you should take it to a Mercedes dealership," Sarah suggested, starting to back away toward the garage. "They'd have the specialized equipment to run proper diagnostics." "Oh, but I was really hoping someone here could help me." The woman's voice had lost its friendly tone, becoming sharper, more focused. "You see, I've been looking for someone for quite some time now. Someone very specific. Someone who used to work for certain government agencies before they decided to Disappear. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward her sleeve, then stopped. The woman's eyes followed the movement, and her smile became genuinely pleased for the first time. "There it is," she said softly. "I knew I recognized you. The tattoo gave you away in a surveillance photo from 6 months ago. You were helping an old lady change her tire outside a grocery store. Such a good Samaritan, but you forgot to keep your sleeve down." The garage suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Sarah's eyes darted around, calculating distances and escape routes. Tony was still in the office, unaware of what was unfolding in his parking lot. The back exit led to an alley, but she would have to cross 20 feet of open space to reach it. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Sarah said calmly, even as her muscles tensed for action. "Elena Vasquez," the woman said, and Sarah's real name hit her like a physical blow. Former CIA operative, specialized in deep cover operations and intelligence gathering. Disappeared from a safe house in Virginia 3 years ago after refusing a direct order. There's been a standing warrant for your return to custody ever since. Sarah's mind flashed back to that night in Virginia, to the assignment she couldn't complete, to the innocent people she had refused to sacrifice for the mission. She had known this day might come, but she had hoped her new life as Sarah Martinez, small-town mechanic, would be enough to keep her hidden forever. The woman reached into her purse, and Sarah saw the subtle bulge of a concealed weapon. "My name is Agent Rebecca Walsh, and I'm here to bring you home, Elena. You can come quietly, or we can do this the hard way. But either way, you're coming with me." Sarah looked at the black SUVs positioned at every exit from the parking lot, at Agent Walsh's confident stance, at Tony's garage where she had found something resembling peace for 3 precious years. Her old life had finally caught up with her new one, and there was nowhere left to run. Sarah's mind raced through her options in the space of a heartbeat. The black SUVs had effectively boxed in the parking lot, and Agent Walsh stood between her and the garage's interior, where Tony remained blissfully unaware of the danger that had descended on his quiet business. The weight of 3 years spent building a normal life pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. "You know," Sarah said conversationally, buying herself precious seconds to think, "I always wondered when someone would finally connect Elena Vasquez to a small-town mechanic in Colorado. I figured it would happen eventually, but I hoped I'd have more time." Agent Walsh's hand remained poised near her purse, her posture relaxed but ready. "You covered your tracks well. I'll give you that. New identity, surgical alteration of facial features, even changed your dominant hand from left to right. Very thorough. But you made one crucial mistake. The tattoo," Sarah acknowledged, her sleeve unconsciously covering the ink that had betrayed her. Not just any tattoo. That specific design was created by a CIA tattoo artist in Langley. Only about 30 operatives ever received it, and we've been monitoring every tattoo parlor and removal clinic in the country for 3 years, waiting for someone to try to have it altered or removed. But you never did. Sarah almost smiled despite the circumstances. The tattoo was a symbol of her former unit, a covert operations team that had operated in the darkest corners of national security. She had kept it because removing it would have required multiple sessions and left distinctive scarring. In trying to avoid one form of detection, she had walked straight into another. The grocery store surveillance was just confirmation, Walsh continued. We'd been tracking a woman matching your altered description in this area for months. Social security number, work history, even your apartment lease, all perfectly crafted false documents. But when that photo came through showing the tattoo, we knew we had found Elena Vasquez. Through the garage's windows, Sarah could see Tony moving around in his office, probably doing paperwork or ordering parts. He had no idea that his quiet afternoon was about to explode into violence. The thought of bringing danger to this good man who had given her a chance at normalcy made her stomach clench with guilt. "What happens to Tony if I come with you?" she asked. Walsh seemed surprised by the question. "The old man? Nothing. He's a civilian. We're not interested in him. But you'll investigate him. Turn his life upside down looking for connections to me. Maybe audit his business, question his customers, make his life miserable just because he employed someone you wanted. That's not your concern anymore. Walsh's voice hardened. You forfeited the right to worry about other people when you went rogue. When you disobeyed direct orders and compromised an operation that cost American lives. The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow, bringing back memories she had tried to bury. The mission in Belarus, the intelligence that had pointed to a terrorist cell. The moment she had realized the target building contained not just enemy combatants but also innocent families. Her refusal to authorize the airstrike had allowed 3 terrorists to escape, and those same men had later killed 6 American soldiers in Afghanistan. I saved 12 children that night, Sarah said quietly. 12 kids who would have died if I'd followed orders. And your conscience cost 6 American soldiers their lives 2 months later. That's the mathematics of our business, Elena. You know that. You've always known that. Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. The moral weight of that night in Belarus had driven her from the agency, had made her desperate enough to fake her own death and assume a new identity. She had traded a life of impossible choices for one of simple problems with mechanical solutions. But the ghosts of those 6 dead soldiers had followed her anyway. A movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. One of the SUVs was repositioning, moving closer to the garage's side entrance. They weren't just here to arrest her, they were preparing for her to run. Agent Walsh might be talking, but her team was getting into position for a takedown. Notice you brought quite an entourage for one rogue operative, Sarah observed. 4 vehicles, probably 12 agents minimum. That seems like overkill for someone who's been quietly fixing cars for 3 years. Walsh's smile was predatory. Oh, Elena, you still don't understand, do you? We're not just here to arrest you. We're here to bring you back into service. The agency has a job for you. The words hit Sarah like ice water. Not arrest, recruitment. They weren't here to punish her for going rogue. They were here to drag her back into the world she had fought so hard to escape. Her mind immediately began calculating the implications. The agency didn't mount operations this size for personnel retrieval unless the mission was critical. What kind of job requires pulling a dead operative out of retirement, she asked, though part of her already knew she wouldn't like the answer. The kind that requires someone with your specific skill set, someone who can disappear into deep cover and emerge years later having built a completely believable alternate identity. Someone who understands the cost of difficult choices and isn't afraid to make them. Walsh paused, letting the words sink in. Someone who can get close to targets that traditional operatives can't reach. Sarah felt the familiar chill of dread that came with CIA recruitment speeches. They always made it sound noble, patriotic, necessary. But she knew that behind the careful language was always something darker, something that would require her to compromise pieces of her soul she wasn't sure she could afford to lose. And if I refuse? Then you go to a federal prison for treason, espionage, and desertion. Solitary confinement, maximum security, no possibility of parole. The official story will be that Elena Vasquez died in a training accident 3 years ago, so Sarah Martinez will simply disappear. No trial, no lawyers, no contact with the outside world. The threat was delivered with casual efficiency, but Sarah could hear the steel beneath Walsh's polite tone. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an ultimatum, wrapped in the illusion of choice. Behind Walsh, Sarah noticed Tony emerging from his office, probably wondering why she was having such a long conversation with a customer instead of working. His appearance changed the entire dynamic of the situation. As long as he was visible, Walsh couldn't risk escalating to violence. But the moment he went back inside or moved out of sight, all bets were off. You have 30 seconds to decide, Walsh said, glancing at her watch. Come with us voluntarily or we take you by force. Either way, you're leaving this garage today. Sarah looked at Tony, at the garage that had been her sanctuary, at the simple life she was about to lose forever. Then she looked at the black SUVs positioned at every exit, at Agent Walsh's confident stance, at the trap that had been 3 years in the making. Her hand moved slowly toward her sleeve, toward the tattoo that had betrayed her, and made her choice. Sarah's fingers traced the edge of her sleeve as she weighed her impossible options. Agent Walsh stood 3 feet away, close enough that Sarah could see the tiny scar above her left eyebrow and smell the mint on her breath. Behind Walsh, Tony had paused in the doorway of his office, his weathered face creased with confusion as he took in the tense scene unfolding in his parking lot. "Hey, Sarah," Tony called out, his Brooklyn accent cutting through the afternoon air. "Everything okay? Out there? This lady giving you trouble with her car?" The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Sarah could see Walsh's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Tony's presence complicated everything. The agency preferred to operate in shadows, away from civilian witnesses who might ask uncomfortable questions later. But Tony was here now, his kind eyes moving between Sarah and the well-dressed stranger, his protective instincts clearly activated by something he couldn't quite identify. "Everything's fine, Tony," Sarah called back, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "Just discussing some repair options." But Tony had been running an auto shop in tough neighborhoods for 40 years, and he had developed a keen sense for when situations were about to go sideways. His gaze shifted to the black SUVs positioned around his parking lot, taking in details that most people would miss. The government plates barely visible beneath mud splatter, the way the vehicles were positioned to block exits, the subtle bulge, under the jacket of a man standing near the corner of the building. "Funny thing about those cars," Tony said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Been sitting there for about 20 minutes now, engines running, nobody getting out. Makes a man wonder what kind of business they're conducting in his neighborhood." Agent Walsh's hand moved fractionally closer to her purse, but she kept her expression pleasant and professional. "Just a routine matter, sir, nothing that concerns you. See, that's where you're wrong, lady." Tony stepped fully out of his office, and Sarah noticed he was carrying the heavy steel wrench he used for the most stubborn bolts. Not exactly a weapon, but not exactly harmless either. "Anything that happens in my parking lot concerns me, especially when it involves one of my employees." The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Sarah could feel the situation balanced on a knife's edge, ready to explode into violence at the smallest provocation. She had to act before Tony got himself hurt trying to protect her. "You know what, Agent Walsh?" Sarah said suddenly, her voice carrying a note of resignation. "You're right. I've been running long enough, maybe it's time to face the music." Relief flickered across Walsh's features, but Sarah caught the agent's slight relaxation and used it. In one fluid movement, she grabbed the hood prop rod from the Mercedes and swung it in a wide arc. The heavy steel rod caught Walsh across the forearm just as she was reaching for her weapon, sending her gun spinning across the asphalt. "Tony, get inside and call 911, Sarah shouted, already moving toward the garage's side entrance. But as she had feared, the black SUVs immediately roared to life, tires squealing as they moved to cut off her escape routes. The parking lot erupted into controlled chaos. Agents poured from the vehicles with the precision of a military operation, their movements coordinated and efficient. Sarah counted at least 8 operatives, all wearing tactical gear under civilian clothes, all armed with weapons that definitely weren't standard FBI issue. Tony, bless his stubborn heart, didn't retreat into his office. Instead, he stepped between Sarah and the nearest agent, brandishing his wrench like a medieval knight with a warhammer. "You want her? You go through me first." "Tony, no!" Sarah called out. But the old mechanic had already committed himself to the fight. The agent approaching Tony made the mistake of underestimating a 70-year-old man who had spent 5 decades wrestling with seized engine parts. Tony's wrench caught the agent's wrist with a crack that was audible across the parking lot, and the man's weapon went flying into the oil-stained gravel. Sarah used the distraction to vault over the hood of a customer's pickup truck, landing in a crouch behind the vehicle's engine block. Bullets immediately began pinging off metal, but these weren't the wild shots of amateurs. They were precisely placed to herd her toward a specific area of the lot where the agents could surround her. "Elena Vasquez," Agent Walsh's voice carried over the sound of gunfire, though Sarah noticed the agent was holding her injured arm close to her body. "Stand down immediately. You're only making this harder on yourself." Sarah risked a glance around the pickup's bumper and immediately ducked back as a bullet struck the spot where her head had been. The shot placement was surgical, close enough to be threatening, but deliberately missing. They wanted her alive, which gave her a slim advantage in a situation where she was drastically outgunned. The garage's interior offered better cover, but reaching it meant crossing 15 feet of open space under fire from multiple angles. Sarah's training kicked in, her mind automatically calculating angles and timing, looking for the pattern in her opponent's movements. These agents were good, but they were following textbook procedures, and Sarah had helped write some of those procedures. A flash of movement caught her eye. Tony had somehow managed to disarm another agent and was now wielding both his wrench and a tactical baton like some kind of geriatric berserker. The old man was creating enough chaos to disrupt the agent's careful positioning, but Sarah knew he couldn't keep it up for long. The old man's interfering with the operation, she heard one of the agents report through his radio. Request permission to neutralize civilian threat. The word sent ice through Sarah's veins. Tony was in danger because of her, because she had brought her past into his peaceful world. The thought of this kind man being hurt or killed because of her choices was unbearable. Permission granted, came the response through the radio. Use necessary force to complete the mission. Sarah saw the agent nearest to Tony raise his weapon, the barrel turning toward the old mechanic who had shown her nothing but kindness for 3 years. Time seemed to slow as her training took over completely, pushing aside fear and doubt and leaving only lethal efficiency. She rolled out from behind the pickup truck, her movements drawing fire away from Tony and toward herself. But instead of seeking cover, she sprinted directly at Agent Walsh, using the woman's injured arm and her team's hesitation to fire on their primary target to close the distance between them. Walsh's eyes widened as Sarah approached, the agent fumbling for her backup weapon with her offhand. But Sarah was already inside her reach, grabbing Walsh around the waist and spinning her around to face her own team. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Walsh shouted as Sarah pressed her forearm against the agent's throat, using her as a human shield. "Do not engage, I repeat, do not engage." The parking lot fell silent except for the sound of engines idling and Tony's labored breathing. Sarah could feel Walsh's pulse racing against her arm, could smell the fear sweat that had replaced the woman's expensive perfume. For a moment, the carefully orchestrated operation had devolved into the kind of messy standoff that gave CIA planners nightmares. "Here's what's going to happen," Sarah called out to the assembled agents. "You're all going to back away from my friend Tony, get in your fancy government cars and drive away. In exchange, Agent Walsh here gets to keep breathing." "You know, we can't do that, Elena," came a voice from behind one of the SUVs. Male, older, carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "You're too valuable to let walk away." Again, Sarah tightened her grip on Walsh, feeling the agent's pulse jump with fear. "Then I guess we have a problem, don't we?" The voice from behind the SUV belonged to someone Sarah recognized even after 3 years. Deputy Director Marcus Chen had been her handler during her final months with the agency, the man who had given her the order she couldn't follow in Belarus. His emergence from behind the vehicle confirmed what she had already suspected. This operation went all the way to the top of the CIA hierarchy. "Hello, Elena," Chen said, stepping into view with his hands raised in a gesture of peaceful intent. He looked older than she remembered, his black hair now streaked with gray and new lines etched around his eyes. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough, Marcus." Sarah kept her grip tight on Agent Walsh, who had stopped struggling and was now breathing in controlled measures designed to conserve oxygen. "I thought I made my position clear when I walked away from your war. You made your position clear when you disobeyed a direct order and compromised a critical operation." Chen's voice carried the weight of old frustrations and newer desperation. "But that's water under the bridge now. We need you back, Elena. Not as punishment, but because you're the only operative we have who can complete this mission." Tony had backed toward the garage entrance, still gripping his wrench and the tactical baton he had acquired during the melee. His face was flushed with exertion, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "Sarah," he called out, "or Elena, or whatever. Your name is... You don't have to listen to these people. We can call the police, the FBI, someone who can help." Chen's laugh was bitter. "Mr. Castellano, I appreciate your loyalty to your employee, but you don't understand the situation. We are the federal government. Elena Vasquez is wanted for treason and desertion. There is no higher authority to appeal to. Bullshit, Tony replied with surprising vehemence. I fought in Vietnam, son. I know the difference between serving your country and serving bureaucrats who think they own people's lives. The old mechanic's words hit Sarah harder than she expected. For 3 years, Tony had been the closest thing to a father figure in her life, and hearing him defend her against overwhelming odds made her chest tight with emotion she couldn't afford to feel. The mission, Elena, Chen continued, ignoring Tony's outburst. It's bigger than Belarus, bigger than personal grievances. We have intelligence suggesting a terrorist cell is planning to detonate a dirty bomb in a major American city. The attack is scheduled for next month and we've identified the cell's location. Sarah felt Agent Walsh tense against her arm. The mention of the dirty bomb had changed something in the agent's posture, adding urgency to what had been professional. Determination. Let me guess, Sarah said. The cell is holed up somewhere you can't reach with traditional methods, somewhere that requires someone who can blend in, build trust, get close enough to gather actionable intelligence. A small town in Montana, Chen confirmed. Population 800. The cell leader has been there for 2 years, building relationships, becoming part of the community. Our analysts believe he's using the town as a shield, knowing we won't risk civilian casualties to take him out. The familiar weight of an impossible choice settled on Sarah's shoulders. Innocent lives hanging in the balance, a mission that only she could complete. The agency using her conscience against her just as they always had. It was Belarus all over again, but with the stakes reversed. How do I know this isn't just another lie to get me back into service, she asked, though part of her already believed Chen was telling the truth. She could hear it in his voice, see it in the way Walsh had responded to the mention of the dirty bomb. This wasn't a recruitment ploy. This was desperation. Chen reached slowly into his jacket and Sarah tensed until she saw he was withdrawing a tablet computer rather than a weapon. He held it up so she could see the screen, which displayed satellite imagery of a small rural town surrounded by mountains and forests. Millbrook, Montana, he said. Population 783. The man we're looking for goes by the name David Mitchell. He runs the town's only hardware store and coaches Little League Baseball. He's also Hakim al-Rashid, formerly of Syrian intelligence, who disappeared from Damascus 6 months before a chemical weapons cache went missing from a government facility. The image on the tablet shifted to show a man in his 40s with graying hair and kind eyes, wearing a baseball cap and surrounded by smiling children in uniform. He looked like every small-town American, the kind of man who would help you change a flat tire or lend you tools for a home repair project. The dirty bomb components? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. We believe they're hidden somewhere in or around Millbrook. Al-Rashid has been using the town as his base while he prepares for the attack. We've intercepted communications suggesting he plans to transport the device to Denver in 3 weeks, during the National Western Stock Show, when the city will be packed with tourists. Denver. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized the implications. The city where she had built her new life, where thousands of innocent people would be going about their daily business, unaware that death was being prepared in a small mountain town 200 miles away. The local authorities? She asked, grasping for alternatives. The sheriff is 70 years old and has 2 deputies. The nearest FBI field office is in Billings, 4 hours away. By the time we could mount a traditional operation, Al-Rashid would be gone and the bomb with him. Chen paused, letting the weight of the situation sink in. We need someone who can go to Millbrook, blend in with the locals, get close to Al-Rashid, and locate the device before he moves it. Agent Walsh spoke for the first time since Sarah had taken her hostage, her voice strained but steady. The mission window is closing fast. Every day we wait is another day he has to prepare, to possibly move the operation to another location we can't track. Sarah looked at Tony, whose face had gone pale as he absorbed the magnitude of what they were discussing. 800 innocent people in Montana, hundreds of thousands more in Denver, all of them unaware that their lives hung in the balance of decisions made in a Denver auto shop parking lot. If I do this, Sarah said slowly, what guarantees do I have? How do I know the agency won't just throw me in prison when the mission is over? You don't, Chen admitted. But you know what happens if you don't do this. You've seen what a dirty bomb can do to a city, to families, to children. You know the mathematics, Elena. One life against hundreds of thousands. The mathematics. The cold calculation that had driven her from the agency in the first place. But this time the equation was different. This time, walking away might mean watching Denver burn on the evening news, knowing she could have prevented it. 24 hours, she said finally. I need 24 hours to think about it. Chen shook his head. We don't have 24 hours. Al-Rashid's communications suggest he's planning to move soon. We need you in Millbrook by tomorrow night. Sarah felt the trap closing around her, just as it had 3 years ago. But this time she couldn't see a way out that didn't end in catastrophe. The weight of the decision pressed down on Sarah like a physical force as she stood in Tony's parking lot. Agent Walsh still secured in her grip, surrounded by federal agents who held the power to either save or destroy hundreds of thousands of lives. The afternoon sun had begun its descent toward the mountains, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the darkness of the choice before her. You're asking me to become someone else again, Sarah said to Chen, her voice barely above a whisper. To walk away from everything I've built here and disappear into another identity, another life of lies. I'm asking you to save lives. Chen replied, his tone gentle but implacable. The same way you saved those children in Belarus. The same instinct that made you refuse to follow orders is the same one that should make you accept this mission. Tony stepped forward, his weathered hands still gripping the wrench that had become his weapon of choice. Sarah, listen to me. I don't know what kind of work you used to do, and I don't care. But I've watched you for 3 years. I've seen how you treat customers, how you help that elderly woman down the street with her car troubles, how you volunteer at the youth center, on weekends. Whatever they're asking you to do, remember who you are now, not who you used to be. The old man's words hit Sarah harder than any tactical assessment or threat evaluation. Tony had seen her at her most genuine, when she thought no one was watching, when she was just Sarah Martinez trying to live a quiet life and maybe do a little good along the way. He had seen the person she had tried to become, not the weapon the agency had forged her to be. The thing is, Tony, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion she was struggling to contain, they're not really asking. They never were. This was always going to end with me back in their world. The only question was whether I'd go willingly or in handcuffs. Agent Walsh stirred against Sarah's grip, and Sarah realized the woman had been listening to every word, filing away information that would undoubtedly appear in reports later. The agency never wasted intelligence, never forgot a detail that might prove useful in future operations. There's another factor you should consider, Walsh said quietly, her voice still strained from the pressure on her throat. Al-Rashid isn't working alone. Our intelligence suggests he's part of a larger network, possibly with cells in other small towns across the country. Stopping him might give us the intelligence we need to prevent multiple attacks. Sarah felt her resolve wavering. Multiple cities, multiple dirty bombs, a terrorist network using America's small towns as shields while they prepared mass casualty attacks. The scope of the threat was beyond anything she had imagined when Walsh first stepped out of her Mercedes. How? Do you know all this intelligence is accurate? She asked. How do I know this isn't just another government lie to manipulate me into compliance? Chen reached into his jacket again, this time withdrawing a secure phone. He activated it and held it toward Sarah, the screen displaying what appeared to be intercepted communications in Arabic. Even from several feet away, Sarah could make out references to timing, transportation, and target acquisition. These communications were intercepted from a cell tower outside Millbrook 3 days ago, Chen explained. Our translators have confirmed multiple references to the gift being moved during the celebration, which correlates with the National Western Stock Show timeline. We also have satellite imagery showing unusual activity at an abandoned mine shaft 12 miles outside the town. The evidence was compelling, but Sarah had been in the intelligence business long enough to know that compelling evidence could be manufactured when necessary. Still, The specificity of the details, the consistency of the timeline, and most importantly, the genuine fear she could see in Agent Walsh's eyes suggested this threat was real. "What's the cover story?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the question. Part of her mind was already accepting the inevitable, already shifting into operational mode despite her conscious resistance. Chen's relief was visible as he recognized her tactical engagement with the mission parameters. Auto mechanic looking. To start fresh in a small town, you'll be taking over the garage that's been for sale for 6 months. The previous owner died, and his widow is eager to sell. Your mechanical expertise won't be questioned, and it gives you a legitimate reason to interact with everyone in town, including Al-Rashid. Documentation? Full legend, backstopped for 5 years. Sarah Martinez, recently divorced, looking for a quiet life away from the city. Clean credit history, no criminal record, references from previous employers that check out if anyone calls. Chen paused, studying her face. "We've been preparing this cover identity since we first located you. 6 months ago, the admission hit Sarah like a slap. They had been watching her, planning this operation, preparing to drag her back into service for half a year. Her quiet life, her growing friendship with Tony, her tentative steps towards something resembling happiness. All of it had been under surveillance, cataloged and analyzed by people who saw her as nothing more than a useful tool. 6 months, she repeated, her voice flat with controlled anger. You've been watching me for 6 months. We've been protecting you for 6 months, Walsh corrected, her voice stronger now despite her precarious position. Do you think it was coincidence that the Russian intelligence services never found you? Or that the Serbian War Crimes Tribunal never connected Elena Vasquez to certain operations in the Balkans? We've been running interference for 3 years, keeping you safe so you'd be available when we needed you. The revelation reframed everything Sarah thought she understood about her exile. She had believed her careful planning and new identity had kept her hidden, but the truth was that the agency had been shielding her all along, protecting their investment until they needed to cash it in. Tony's face had grown increasingly pale as he listened to the conversation, the reality of Sarah's former life finally sinking in. Jesus Christ, Sarah. What did you used to do for these people? Things that keep regular folks like you safe at night, Sarah replied, her voice hollow. Things that make it possible for you to sleep soundly in your bed, knowing that someone else is handling the monsters in the dark. And now they want you to handle monsters again, Tony said, his voice heavy with understanding and something that might have been grief. Sarah released Agent Walsh and stepped back, raising her hands to show she was no longer a threat. The agents around the parking lot tensed but held their positions, waiting for orders from Chen. The brief standoff was over, but the larger conflict was far from resolved. If I do this, Sarah said to Chen, I want guarantees. Real ones, not just promises you'll break the moment I'm no longer useful. What kind of guarantees? Tony's shop gets left alone. No audits, no investigations, no harassment from any government agency for any reason. He's been good to me and he doesn't deserve to suffer for my choices. Chen nodded. Agreed. Second, when this mission is over, really over, not just when you decide you don't need me anymore, I walk away clean. New identity, new location, and this time you don't keep tabs on me. I disappear for real. That's more complicated but possible. Third, if this goes bad, if Al-Rashid realizes who I am or if the mission is compromised, you extract me immediately. No expendable asset protocols, no acceptable losses calculations. You get me out. Chen hesitated at this demand, and Sarah knew she had touched on something the agency wasn't prepared to promise. Expendable asset protocols were standard for deep cover operations in hostile territory, and she had operated under them many times in her career. Elena, you know we can't guarantee. Then find someone else to go to Montana, Sarah interrupted. Those are my terms, all of them or none of them. Agent Walsh had straightened her jacket and was checking her injured arm, but Sarah caught her, exchanging a meaningful look with Chen. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind of wordless coordination that came from years of working together on operations where lives hung in the balance. Acceptable, Chen said finally. All three conditions are acceptable. Sarah looked at Tony, whose expression had shifted from confusion to something approaching pride. Despite everything he had learned about her past, despite the violence that had erupted in his parking lot, he was looking at her with the same respect and affection he had shown for 3 years. "You're really going to do this," Tony said. "It wasn't a question. I don't have a choice. Too many people will die if I don't." Sarah walked over to the old mechanic and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Take care of yourself, Tony, and thank you for everything. These 3 years, they were the best of my life." Tony's eyes were suspiciously bright as he nodded. "You come back when this is over, you hear me? This garage will always have a place for you." Sarah knew she would never see Tony or his garage again, knew that the woman who walked away from this parking lot would be different from the one who had arrived this morning to work on Mrs. Henderson's Buick. But she smiled anyway, letting him keep the hope that Sarah Martinez might somehow survive what Elena Vasquez was about to do. 24 hours to prepare, she said to Chen. "I'll need equipment, documentation, and a detailed briefing on everything you know about Al-Rashid and Millbrook." "Already prepared. There's a safe house in Golden where you can review the mission files and receive your equipment." Sarah nodded, then looked around the parking lot one last time. The black SUVs, the federal agents, the debris from her brief fight for freedom, all of it would be cleaned up and forgotten within hours, but the memory of this moment, of choosing duty over happiness, would stay with her forever. "Let's go save the world," she said, and walked toward the waiting government cars. 3 weeks later, Sarah Martinez stepped out of her rental car onto the main street of Millbrook, Montana, and breathed in the crisp mountain air that carried the scent of pine trees and the promise of early snow. The town looked exactly as it had in the satellite imagery, a collection of weathered buildings clustered around a single main street, surrounded by mountains that rose like ancient guardians against a sky so blue it seemed artificial. The transformation, from Elena Vasquez, rogue CIA operative, back to Sarah Martinez, small-town mechanic, had taken every hour of those 24 preparation hours and then some. New documentation, updated backstory, and most importantly, the psychological shift from someone trying to escape her past to someone fully committed to completing the most dangerous mission of her career. Miller's garage sat at the end of Main Street, a modest building with 2 service bays and a small office that looked like it had been unchanged since the 1970s. The previous owner, Earl Miller, had run the place for 37 years before a heart attack claimed him last spring. His widow, Betty, had been trying to sell ever since, and Sarah's cash offer had been accepted within hours of her arrival. "You must be the new mechanic Betty told us about," called a friendly voice from across the street. Sarah turned to see a man in his 40s approaching with an easy smile and oil-stained hands. He was tall, well-built, with graying hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. Everything about him screamed small-town American, from his flannel shirt to his worn work boots. But Sarah's trained eye caught details that didn't quite fit, the way he moved with unconscious tactical awareness, how his eyes briefly assessed her as a potential threat before shifting to friendly curiosity, and most tellingly, the faint scar along his jawline that looked suspiciously like the result of interrogation techniques she had seen in Syrian prisons. "David Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. "I run the hardware store just down the block. Welcome to Millbrook." "Sarah Martinez," she replied, accepting his handshake and noting the calluses that came from more than just running a hardware store. "Nice to meet you, David." "Hakim al-Rashid," she corrected mentally, former Syrian intelligence operative, suspected terrorist, and the man she had traveled across the country to stop. Up close, he was even more convincing than his photographs had suggested. If she hadn't known better, she would have taken him for exactly what he appeared to be, a helpful neighbor welcoming a newcomer to their small community. "Betty mentioned you're from Colorado," Al-Rashid continued, seemingly oblivious to her scrutiny. "Denver area?" "That's right. Got tired of the city life, decided to try something quieter." Sarah delivered her cover story with practiced ease, adding just enough personal detail to make it believable. "Recently divorced, looking for a fresh start somewhere I can actually see the stars at night. Al-Rashid's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. Divorce is tough. I went through one myself a few years back. But you'll find Millbrook is a good place to heal. People here look out for each other. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The man planning to detonate a dirty bomb in Denver was offering her comfort about a fictional divorce, playing the role of caring community member so perfectly that she almost believed it herself. I hope so, she said. I'm planning to reopen the garage next week once I get everything sorted out. Earl left the place in pretty good shape, but there's always work to do. If you need any supplies or tools, you know where to find me. I try to keep everything a small operation might need. Al-Rashid glanced at his watch, a gesture that seemed casual but struck Sarah as calculated. Actually, I should probably get back to the store. We're expecting a delivery this afternoon. Sarah's pulse quickened at the mention of a delivery, though she kept her expression neutral. Intel suggested that Al-Rashid was still assembling components for his device, which meant any unusual deliveries were worth investigating. What kind of delivery? She asked, injecting just the right amount of small-town curiosity into her voice. Farm equipment parts for one of the ranchers outside town. Al-Rashid replied smoothly. Nothing exciting, but it pays the bills. The explanation was plausible, even boring, which made Sarah more suspicious rather than less. In her experience, the most dangerous operations were hidden behind the most mundane activities. Farm equipment parts could easily conceal radioactive materials or sophisticated timing devices. After Al-Rashid left, Sarah spent the afternoon exploring Millbrook under the pretense of familiarizing herself with her new home. The town was exactly what it appeared to be, a small, isolated community where everyone knew everyone else's business, where strangers were noticed immediately, and where a terrorist could hide in plain sight by being the most helpful, most normal person in town. The post office was run by Martha Hendricks, a woman in her 60s who knew every piece of gossip in a 50-mile radius. The diner was owned by Jack and Sally Chen, who had moved to Montana from California 20 years earlier, seeking the same quiet life that Sarah was supposedly after. The sheriff, Tom Bradley, was indeed in his 70s and seemed more concerned with teenage vandalism than international terrorism. By evening, Sarah had established herself as the new mechanic, rented a small apartment above the garage, and begun the delicate work of integrating into the community without appearing too interested in any particular resident. It was a balancing act she had performed dozens of times in dozens of countries, but never with stakes this high or a timeline this compressed. The intelligence Chen had provided suggested Al-Rashid was planning to move his device within days, possibly hours. Sarah's mission was to locate the radioactive materials, confirm their nature and destination, and provide coordinates for a surgical strike that would eliminate the threat without harming innocent civilians. Simple in concept, potentially catastrophic if she made even the smallest mistake. That night, she sat in her small apartment reviewing the mission files one more time. Al-Rashid's background was more extensive than she had initially realized. Born in Damascus, educated in London, recruited by Syrian intelligence in his 20s, and involved in operations across 3 continents before disappearing 18 months ago. He wasn't just dangerous. He was brilliant, experienced, and patient enough to spend years building the perfect cover while assembling the components for mass destruction. The abandoned mine shaft 12 miles outside town remained the most likely location for his operations center. Satellite imagery showed regular vehicle traffic to and from the site, always at night, always using vehicles registered to local businesses. But approaching the mine would require careful surveillance, and surveillance took time she didn't have. A soft knock at her door interrupted her planning. Sarah quickly secured the files and checked her watch. Nearly midnight. In a town like Millbrook, midnight visitors usually meant emergencies or trouble. She opened the door to find Al-Rashid standing in the hallway, holding a casserole dish, and wearing the same friendly smile she had seen earlier. "Sorry to bother you so late," he said, "but my neighbor Mrs. Patterson made way too much lasagna and asked me to bring some over to the new resident. Small-town tradition." Sarah accepted the dish, acutely aware that Al-Rashid was studying her apartment, taking in details about how she lived, what she owned, who she might really be. The intelligence officer in him was probably as active as the terrorist, and she couldn't afford to let either persona detect anything suspicious. "That's very kind," she said. "Everyone here has been so welcoming." "We take care of our own in Millbrook," Al-Rashid replied. "By the way, I couldn't help but notice you have Colorado plates on your car. I used to spend time in Denver on business. Beautiful city, especially during the winter months." The comment sent ice through Sarah's veins. There was something in the way he said winter months that suggested he knew exactly when the National Western Stock Show would be held, exactly when Denver would be packed with tourists, exactly when a dirty bomb would cause maximum casualties. "Always preferred the mountains to the city," Sarah replied carefully. "Too much noise and chaos in Denver for my taste." Al-Rashid nodded, but his eyes had grown calculating. "Well, you'll find plenty of peace and quiet here. Sleep well, Sarah. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day." After he left, Sarah sat in her kitchen and stared at the innocent-looking casserole dish, wondering if the man who had brought it was already suspicious of her, already planning to accelerate his timeline, already preparing to unleash hell on the world she had tried so hard to leave behind. Outside her window, the mountains stood silhouetted against a star-filled sky, beautiful and serene and completely unaware that the fate of hundreds of thousands of people might be decided in the next few hours by a rogue CIA operative who had run out of places to hide and choices to make.